was 16. It started one night I just came home from school and we were sitting in the living room eating dinner. And I noticed that when I was eating, when I was going to swallow my food, like it hurted, like I felt like a lump in my throat. So I'm like, Mom, something feels weird when I swallow. She was like, oh, maybe you're chewing your food too fast, just slow down. Like as the days progressed, it just kept getting worse. We went to my doctor, he said the same thing. Like just slow down when you eat, you might be eating too fast. Over the months period of time, it went from me like, from it just hurting when I swallowed to, from eating to it just hurting when I swallowed anything. So after going to the emergency room, like this was like the third time of going to the emergency room with them not knowing what was wrong with me, a different doctor came in there and he looked at me and he was like, wow, like she's really dehydrated. The last step that they did was to put a camera down my throat. And at that point they found that I had something called esophagitis, which is an infection in your esophagus. It was like a bump on my left arm, so I'm like, it looked like a mosquito bite, but it was in January, so I'm like, I know it's not any mosquitoes. And when my doctor came in there, he was like, okay, yeah, you have it. So me and my mom were looking at him like, have what? He was like, you have something called shingles. And then before we left, he was like, have you ever thought about having an HIV test? And I was like, no, I don't have HIV. I didn't even know what HIV stood for, but I just knew that I didn't have it. I had never thought about HIV. That was just something that we didn't talk about, me and my friends. So he was like, I think that you should get an HIV test because of the sicknesses that you've been getting back to back. Those are symptoms for a person with HIV. So everything went back on as normal. My arm healed up, my throat was healed up. Everything was back to normal. I was back in school, just living life. I'm in my mom's room watching TV and she calls me to the phone. She's in the kitchen cooking. She calls me to the phone like, doctor's on the phone. So now I'm thinking like, okay, something must really be important. This doctor keeps calling me. It was kind of making me mad. So I picked up the phone. He's like, hi, Lolisa. I'm like, hi. Your results came back to your HIV test. I'm like, okay. He's like, is there any way I can tell you them over the phone? Is it okay? And I was like, yeah, it's fine. So do you have any idea what your results are? And the whole time I'm thinking like, I wish he'd just hurry up so I could finish watching this TV show that I'm watching. So he told me, he's like, your results came back positive. And at that point, like, I just lost it. Like, my whole mind just went blank. My whole childhood, I was in love with Bow Wow, the rapper. So I'm like, okay, this boy is never going to marry me now. Like, I'm going to die tomorrow. That's the only thing I could think. I still didn't know what HIV was, but I was just like, I know people died from it. So I'm like, I'm going to die tomorrow. The doctor was still talking to my mom, but I was already thinking other things on the other phone. You know, Lolisa, the amount of the virus in your blood is greater than 100,000. Like, that's the highest that we can even test. So we think that you might have been born with it or had it for at least 10 years without knowing. So I'm like, what? So he was saying, like, with my age, with me just being 17, like, it could have been no way that I could have just gotten it through sex unless there was, like, a new strand that they didn't know about. After being on the medicine for 3 months, I became undetectable. One day, about like 2 weeks later, after we found out, after I was on the medicine, I came home from school and my mom was like, come walk with me outside to the mailbox. She's saying like, oh, I got tested and, you know, I have it too. So I was like, okay. So, like, I didn't really know what to say. I was just like, still trying to come to grips that I had it. Soon after that, I asked my social worker, how can I get more involved? I want to do more. How can I do more? How can I meet more people? So she took me to a nonprofit in Delaware, like a major AIDS service organization in Delaware. And then I got certified to do HIV testing, and I'm testing people. Then one day, it was for World AIDS Day, one of the girls at the clinic that I was still at the same clinic, she told me that she wanted to come out to her school for World AIDS Day. She was 15, and this little girl, she was so little, but her voice was just so big. And I was like, okay, I'll go with you. So I went to the school, and I spoke there, and this was my first time in front of a bunch of strangers just telling my story. After that, like, I just decided this is what I wanted to do. I wanted to speak to people about HIV. So I went back home to New York. You know, I found a man when I first moved to New York. So we decided to have the baby. We have a son he was born HIV negative in September 2009. While the man now, he's my fiance, where he's also HIV negative. I mean, I believe in God really, really strongly, and I think that it's all a blessing. Because that day, if I would have never got that test, how sick I was that I didn't even know I was that sick. If I would have never got that test, I probably wouldn't even be here, to share my story. HIV is something that we should talk about every day. My name is Lolisa Gibson. Does HIV look like me?